High up in the Altiplano of the Andes Mountains, there is a place that shouldn't exist. It is a place where the wind screams at 4,000 meters above sea level. It is a place where the air is so thin that your heart has to hammer against your ribs just to keep your brain alive. There are no trees here. There is almost no grass. In the winter, the cold is so sharp it feels like a blade against your skin. Most people would call this a wasteland. But in the year 1611, this frozen rock was home to 160,000 people. To put that in perspective, that was more people than lived in London or Paris at the time. It was the largest, wealthiest, and most dangerous city in the Western Hemisphere. They called it Potosí, and it was all built at the foot of a single, red cone-shaped mountain called Cerro Rico, which means the rich hill. This mountain was not made of rock and dirt. It was practically made of solid silver. People said that the streets of Potosí were paved with silver bars. They said the horses wore silver shoes. They said the wealthy residents were so bored with their riches that they threw silver plates out the window after every meal just so they wouldn't have to wash them. But behind this glittery, silk-covered curtain was a horror story that lasted for centuries. This is the story of Potosí, the city that fueled the global economy and earned the terrifying nickname the mountain that eats men. It all started in 1545 with a lost llama and a very lucky man named Diego Gualpa. Diego was an indigenous shepherd who was searching for a stray animal on the slopes of the mountain. Night fell and it got cold. Fast, he started a small fire to keep from freezing to death. When he woke up the next morning, he saw something glowing in the ashes. He looked closer. It wasn't just a shiny rock. It was a stream of pure, molten silver that had melted out of the ground from the heat of his fire. Some stories say he pulled up a bush and found silver nuggets clinging to the roots like potatoes. Either way, the secret was out. Within months, the Spanish had arrived, and the gold-hungry conquerors realized they had hit the biggest jackpot in human history. They had been looking for El Dorado, the city of gold. But they found something even better. A mountain of silver so massive it would change the value of money on every continent on Earth. The boom was instant. It was like the California gold rush, but on steroids and located on the roof of the world. Imagine a city appearing out of nowhere in a place where people can barely breathe. Potosí became a Wild West town the size of a metropolis. It was a place of extreme contrasts. On one street, you had grand stone cathedrals and palaces decorated with intricate carvings. You had 36 gambling houses, 14 dance schools, and several theaters. You had merchants selling silk from China, velvet from Italy, and diamonds from India. The rich men of Potosí dressed in the finest fashions of Europe even though they were shivering in the Andean chill. They held lavish festivals where they spent millions of pesos on fireworks and wine. It was the ultimate party at the end of the world. But if you walked just a few blocks away, you entered a different world entirely. A world of dust, poison, and death. Because the silver didn't just jump out of the mountain and into the Spanish pockets. It had to be dug out, and as the easy silver on the surface ran out, the mines went deeper and deeper into the dark heart of Cerro Rico. The Spanish needed labor, a lot of it, and they didn't want to pay for it. So they looked back at an old Incan system called the mita. In the original Incan Empire, the mita was a form of public service where citizens worked on roads or temples for a few months a year. The Spanish took that idea and turned it into a death sentence. They required every indigenous community in the region to send a certain percentage of their men to Potosí to work the mines. Every Sunday, the bells of the great churches would ring, and the draft would begin. Thousands of men, along with their wives and children, would begin the long walk to the mountain. Some of them traveled for weeks. They knew they might never come back. Once they reached the mountain, the men were sent down into the shafts. These weren't the safe, well-ventilated mines we think of today. These were narrow, twisting tunnels that dropped hundreds of feet into the earth. The miners had to climb down flimsy leather ladders that swayed in the dark. They carried candles tied to their foreheads. The air was thick with dust and toxic gases. It was so hot in the deep tunnels that the men worked almost naked. But when they climbed back out with heavy bags of ore on their backs, the freezing mountain air would hit them, causing instant pneumonia. This transition from the heat of the earth to the ice of the sky was one of the biggest killers. The miners worked in shifts of 12 hours, sometimes staying underground for an entire week. They ate, slept, and worked in the dark. They used coca leaves to numb the hunger and the pain. But the mine wasn't the only killer. Once the ore came out of the mountain, it had to be processed. In the 1600s, the Spanish used a technique called the patio process. They would grind the ore into a fine powder and then mix it with salt, copper sulfate, and a massive amount of liquid mercury, or quicksilver. They would spread this toxic sludge out on large stone floors and have workers, including children, wade through it barefoot to mix the chemicals. The mercury would bind with the silver, allowing it to be separated. But mercury is a deadly neurotoxin. The workers would breathe in the vapors as the mixture was heated. Their teeth would fall out. Their limbs would start to shake uncontrollably. Their brains would slowly melt. Thousands died of mercury poisoning, their bodies literally saturated with the heavy metal. Because of this, the indigenous people came to view the mountain as a living, hungry demon. They called it the mouth of hell. And inside the mines, a strange new religion was born. While the miners were officially Catholic and prayed to the Virgin Mary on the surface, down in the dark, they prayed to a different master. They built statues of a demon they called LT, or the Uncle. LTO was the lord of the underworld, the true owner of the silver. The miners believed that if they didn't give him offerings, he would cause the tunnels to collapse or hide the silver veins. Even today, if you go into the mines of Potosí, you will see these statues. They have horns, glowing eyes, and large mouths. The miners bring them cigarettes, coca leaves, and bottles of strong alcohol. They pour libations on the ground to satisfy the mountain's thirst for blood. It is a haunting reminder that in Potosí, the line between the sacred and the profane was always blurred. While the mines were eating men, the city above was eating itself. Potosí was perhaps the most violent city on earth. It was a place of lawless greed where everyone was armed and everyone was angry. The biggest conflict was between two groups of Spaniards. On one side were the Basques, who controlled the mining industry and held all the power. On the other side were the Vicuñas, a nickname for a faction of rebels and newcomers who felt they were being cheated out of the wealth. The name came from the Vicuña, a wild relative of the llama whose wool was used to make the hats worn by the rebels. For decades, these two groups fought a bloody gang war in the streets. We are talking about full-scale battles with swords, muskets, and even small cannons. City officials wore chainmail under their silk robes just to survive a trip to the market. Assassinations were a daily occurrence. You could be killed for your silver, or you could be killed just because you looked at someone the wrong way. It was a city where the only law was the law of the blade. But despite the horror and the chaos, Potosí was the engine of the world. The silver from this one mountain changed everything. It funded the Spanish Empire for 200 years. It paid for the Spanish Armada that tried to invade England. It paid for the endless wars in the Netherlands. But the silver didn't stay in Spain. Spain had a lot of debt, and they used the silver to pay back bankers in Italy and Germany. From there, the silver flowed east. In the 1600s, the only thing the great Ming dynasty in China wanted from the outside world was silver. They had switched their entire tax system to silver, and they were desperate for it. So the silver from Potosí was loaded onto ships in Acapulco, Mexico, and sailed across the Pacific to Manila, where it was traded for Chinese silk and porcelain. This was the first truly global trade network. A piece of 8 minted in Potosí could end up in a merchant's pocket in London, a soldier's purse in the Ottoman Empire, or a royal treasury in Beijing. But this flood of silver had a strange effect. Because there was so much of it, the value of silver began to drop. This caused the price revolution in Europe, a massive wave of inflation that lasted for a century. Prices for food and rent tripled, while wages stayed the same. In Spain, the easy wealth of Potosí actually ruined the economy. The Spanish stopped producing things because they could just buy them with silver. When the silver eventually started to run out, the Spanish Empire collapsed like a house of cards. They had spent their future on a mountain of silver that turned out to be a curse. And what about the mountain today? Cerro Rico is still there, but it is a shadow of its former self. After 5 centuries of constant digging, the mountain is like a giant piece of Swiss cheese. It is filled with thousands of miles of unstable tunnels. Every year, the mountain literally sinks a few inches as the internal structure collapses. Geologists say the whole thing could cave in at any moment. The city of Potosí is now a quiet, dusty colonial town. The grand palaces are museums. The Great Silver Mint is a tourist attraction. But the mining hasn't stopped. Thousands of miners still go into the mountain every day. They aren't looking for silver anymore. Most of that is gone. They are looking for tin, lead, and zinc, and they are still dying. They still offer cigarettes to LTO. They still suffer from silicosis and accidents. The mountain that eats men is still hungry. Potosí is the ultimate monument to human greed. It shows us what we are willing to do to each other for the sake of a shiny medal. We built a city in a place where we couldn't breathe. We sacrificed millions of lives in the dark. We created a global economy on a foundation of bone and mercury. The silver of Potosí built the modern world. It funded the rise of capitalism. It connected the continents. It provided the capital for the Industrial Revolution. But it also left a scar on the earth and on the human soul that has never fully healed. So next time you look at a silver coin or a piece of jewelry, think about the thin air of the Andes. Think about the swaying leather ladders and the black vomit. Think about the silk-clad gamblers in the frozen streets and the shivering miners in the dark. Potosí was the womb of the modern world, a place where the extreme beauty of human achievement met the extreme ugliness of human cruelty. It was a city that shouldn't have existed, but it changed everything. And as the wind blows through the empty plazas of Potosí today, you can almost hear the echoes of the bells and the hammers, reminding us that the cost of wealth is often measured in lives, not in ounces. The mountain is still there, red and silent, watching over a city that once owned the world. It is a reminder that empires come and go, but the earth remembers every ounce of silver we take and every life we give in exchange. Potosí was the heart of the world for 100 years, and its beat was the sound of a pickaxe striking stone in the dark. It is a story of wealth beyond imagination and suffering beyond words. A story of a mountain made of silver and a city built on the edge of hell.